I had the ring, the reservation, and the woman I loved, until one night shattered it all. Let me start from the top. My name's Brian, and I've never in my life felt the kind of rage that hit me that day. It wasn't just anger, it was a deep, uncontrollable fury that I wouldn't wish on anyone. In that moment, I was shaking with the urge to lash out, to physically confront two people who had torn my world apart. You might be wondering what could drive someone to feel that way. I'll tell you. It all began about 5 weeks ago. My wife, Jessica, started acting different. It was like she flipped a switch and became someone I didn't recognize, like a chameleon morphing into a stranger. She suddenly recoiled from any form of closeness with me. She pulled away emotionally, physically, completely. At first, I thought maybe she was just stressed from work, but the signs kept piling up. She worked in accounting, nowhere near the clients, and yet she began saying she needed to meet with people for work, often after hours outside the office. It didn't make sense. It wasn't her job. But what hurt more than anything else was that this emotional withdrawal wasn't new, it was just sharper now. Before I even knew about the cheating, there'd already been the mocking, the name-calling, the cold shoulders. Her words stung worse than silence. Then came the blow. I found out she was having an affair. And the guy, a co-worker from another department, someone people whispered about being in some kind of tactical unit, maybe the emergency response team or something. That part didn't matter to me. What mattered was that the person I loved betrayed me. So I did what I had to do. I handed Jessica the divorce papers. The locksmith I'd hired earlier that week was finishing up changing every lock in our house right around that same time. I'd already taken steps to split our finances fairly, made sure everything was clean and even, no fights over money. I canceled every credit card we had together and rerouted our joint accounts so neither of us could pull something unexpected. The last couple of weeks had been a flurry of preparation, and it all led up to this. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. I tracked down the place where they'd been meeting, a rundown motel on the edge of town. When I walked into the front office, I handed the manager $100, along with a quiet request to keep things discreet. He didn't ask questions. Just gave me the key and, surprisingly, opened up a bit about his own ex-wife. Said he saw pieces of his story in mine. That hit me. I stood outside that door holding the key, my heart pounding like a war drum. I turned it slowly in the lock, pushed the door open with deliberate care and stepped inside. Quiet. Calm. Almost too calm. Then I saw him. He moved toward me from the side and without thinking, without planning, I reacted. I swung hard. My fist connected with his jaw and I swear for a moment he was airborne. The sheer force of that moment, fueled by betrayal, heartbreak and months of pent-up pain, exploded out of me. And the second after it happened, I froze. My hand was still trembling. I couldn't believe I had let myself snap like that. I bent down to check on him just to make sure I hadn't done something I'd regret forever. He was dazed but alive. That was the end of it for me. I turned my back on that room, that motel, that chapter of my life. I went home to a house with new locks, a new silence, and a divorce on the table. That's where I am now. I opened a separate bank account and moved her share of the assets into it. Everything was done by the book. She got the official notice. Our marriage, our relationship, whatever was left of it, was officially over. I didn't expect a thank you, especially since she barely contributed toward anything. But I handed her the documents anyway. She was curled up under the blanket, like a kid hiding from trouble. I placed the papers gently on her lap. She gave them a quick glance, then lifted her eyes to meet mine. We didn't speak. Not a single word passed between us. But in that silence, there was a heaviness, like the air itself had given up. It was the kind of stillness that follows a storm when there's nothing left to say. Before I left, I stopped by the locksmith who helped me secure the house. He was quick, reliable. I thanked him for his time and as a small gesture, I handed him a $20 bill. It felt strange tipping someone for helping me lock someone out of my life. Later that evening, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the same spot where we once shared morning coffees and Sunday breakfasts. Now, it felt like just another chair in just another empty room. I kept replaying it all in my head. 5 weeks. That's how long it took to unravel everything we had built over the years. The way Simone changed almost overnight still didn't make sense to me. She had once admired so many things about me, my loyalty, my calm nature, the way I tried to hold our world together. But now it was like none of it had ever mattered. I couldn't wrap my head around her motivations. What had changed in her? Where did all that quiet resentment come from? But even if I didn't understand her, one thing was clear. This chapter of our lives was closed. In the middle of that spiral of thought, I got a call. It was Doris, Simone's best friend. She'd been a kind soul through everything. She didn't take sides, just tried to listen. But her voice on the other end of the line cracked in a way I hadn't heard before. "Brian, is there any way you can fix this?" she asked softly. I sighed. "I really don't think so, Doris. This is bigger than a misunderstanding. It's the kind of break that doesn't heal." The silence that followed her question was almost more painful than the words. Not long after, I got a call from Simone's father. I always had a deep respect for her parents. They treated me like their own. He sounded concerned. "Brian, I was present last night when Simone opened up to her mother. I think it's important you hear what she said. Can we meet?" Of course I said yes. We sat down the next day, just the two of us. He looked tired. Like this had drained him too. Then he shared Simone's words. Her mother asked her why, he said, eyes downcast. Simone said, "Mom, Brian has always been the only man I've ever been with. I never knew what anything else felt like. And when Greg came along, it wasn't just about attraction. It was about curiosity. It was the idea of doing something new, of feeling something different." I could barely breathe. She told her mother she didn't plan on it, that it just happened, that she thought our relationship was already slipping. And Greg was a moment of escape. She said it happened in his office, their first time. And once that door opened, she didn't want to close it. It wasn't that she stopped loving me, she said, but that she wanted to feel what she thought others had. The irony is, I gave her everything, and still she was looking for something else. I sat there listening to all of this, and the only thing I could think was, we were already over before I even realized we were falling apart. What happened between Greg and me? It crossed lines I never thought I'd even approach, let alone step over. I found myself doing things with him that I'd never even imagined in my time with Brian. It wasn't just the physical, it was the secrecy, the danger, the emotional chaos that somehow felt addictive. The strange part is, we always managed to wrap things up just before someone could catch us. That afternoon, after slipping out of Greg's office and smoothing my clothes back into place, the anger I'd once felt toward him, toward everything, seemed to soften. I still remember the taste of him on my lips. And as much as I wanted to pretend it meant nothing, all I could think about was when I'd see him again. It wasn't long before Greg made it clear that he wasn't thinking about this as a one-time escape either. He approached me the very next day, quiet but direct. Said his wife was starting to pick up on things. Someone from work must have let something slip, about how often we were seen talking, how we lingered in each other's company a bit too long. Even though we worked in separate departments, whispers had started. But ending it? That wasn't even on the table. We both knew it. This wasn't about love or a future together. This was about feeding something in ourselves that we didn't fully understand or maybe didn't want to. It was physical, plain and simple. Still, when I think back, when I really sit with it, I can't help but feel sick. Brian gave me nothing but kindness. He treated me with love, patience, respect. And I threw all of that away for fleeting pleasure and an illusion of excitement. I chose desire over devotion. And it all came crashing down. That day when everything unraveled, Greg and I were caught red-handed. Brian found us, and I can still see the moment he raised the camera, cold and steady. Click. The image of me with Greg frozen in time, something that would never be unseen. Greg, probably panicking, mumbled something I couldn't even process. Then, without warning, he lunged at Brian. But it was over before it began. In one swift motion, Brian stepped to the side and sent Greg flying. I'm not exaggerating, he was airborne for a second before crashing onto the floor like a rag doll. The room went silent, like time had stopped. Then Brian looked at me. Just looked. That stare broke me. All I could feel was shame. Heavy, suffocating shame. I couldn't even hold his gaze. I turned away, covering my face with my hands like that would somehow undo what I had done. I wanted to disappear. The motel manager was standing nearby. He didn't say much, but the disgust on his face said everything. I could tell he'd been through something similar. He didn't need to tell me. His own wife had betrayed him once too. That's why he gave Brian the key in the first place. It wasn't revenge. It was solidarity. And I understood then what I had destroyed. Not just a marriage. Not just trust. I had torn down something sacred. All for something that wasn't even real. But the consequences didn't end there. The next morning, more about Greg came to light. Turns out, what I thought was a messy affair was just the tip of the iceberg. He was under investigation for multiple counts of fraud, stealing money from the company, fabricating receipts, skimming wherever he could. Over time, the total became staggering. He was charged with grand theft. When his wife found out, she didn't hesitate. She packed up their 3 children and left him, moving back in with her parents out east. Just like that, Greg lost everything: his job, his family, his reputation. And me? I lost Brian. Later that week, I heard from my father. Sam told me Doris and he are letting Simone stay with them, he said over the phone. His voice was thick with confusion and something else: sorrow. And when I heard that, I finally broke. The tears came without warning, and I didn't try to stop them. In the days that followed, I found myself thinking a lot about Simone's parents. They were genuinely good people, kind, old-fashioned folks who didn't deserve to be dragged into any of this. I actually struggled for a while with whether or not to tell them everything I knew. A part of me held back, knowing that if they warned Simone too soon, it might jeopardize my chance of gathering the proof I needed. But once the photo surfaced, everything changed. It wasn't just a rumor anymore. It was real. Tangible. Then came the legal side of things. I had a long conversation with the company's attorney, and something about that affidavit flipped the entire case on its head. The company, once seemingly indifferent to the whispers floating around the office, now had a legal reason to act. According to the lawyer, there was a strong chance that Simone, Greg, and a few others involved in covering things up could all be terminated by the end of the next business day, unless somehow they came up with a convincing defense. Honestly, I couldn't see how they would. As for Greg, the charge of alienation of affection wasn't just legal jargon anymore. It was personal. That man knowingly involved himself with a married woman and helped destroy a family in the process. And here's something I hadn't realized until later. Simone's betrayal had been going on for longer than I first thought. It wasn't just a brief lapse in judgment. She had started seeing Greg a full 10 weeks before I ever confronted her. I'd only started picking up on the signs after 5 weeks, which means that by the time I walked into that motel room and caught them, she'd already been living a double life for over 2 months. That realization hit me hard. Those 5 weeks after I found out were some of the darkest I've ever faced. There were only 3 moments in my life that shook me to the core, and that was one of them. Even now, I can't quite explain how much it unraveled me. But I remember something strange and unexpected. After leaving that motel room, after seeing it all with my own eyes, I felt calm. Not numb, not angry. Just a kind of eerie stillness. Like my heart had stopped fighting. Later on, Simone tried to make amends, at least in a material sense. She offered to cover my legal fees, court costs, and even offered a large sum of money as some sort of peace offering to get my agreement on certain terms. But money doesn't stitch a broken heart. And I didn't want anything from her that resembled payment for silence. Since then, things haven't been easy for her. Living back at her parents' place, she's had to face the reality of what she did, not just to me but to them, to herself. Her life flipped upside down, and I know she's struggling to find her footing again. I heard from someone that she feels like a fraud in her own skin. That shame is sticking to her, heavy and constant. And I don't know if she'll ever be able to fully shake it. As for me, there was one final decision I had to make. A hard one. I stepped away from my job. It wasn't something I planned or even really thought I'd do, but after everything, I just couldn't bring myself to show up at the office anymore. Too many memories, too much noise in my head. When I turned in my resignation, my bosses were genuinely surprised. They tried to talk me out of it, sat me down, offered support. I appreciated it, I really did. But I knew I was done. When they finally realized I wasn't changing my mind, they gave me something I didn't expect. A kind, heartfelt letter of recommendation. A gesture of real understanding. I left with that in hand, grateful and oddly at peace. Not long ago, I met someone new. Her name's Kelly. And our story started off in an unexpected way. I accidentally overheard a private phone call she was having with one of her closest friends. It wasn't something I meant to do, but once I heard the tone of her voice, the honesty in it, I couldn't unhear what she was saying. We'd been together for around 2 years at that point. I was actually starting to think about taking the next step, about getting down on one knee and asking her to spend the rest of her life with me. That's how deep my feelings had grown. Kelly isn't the type to stand out in a crowd, not at first. She's quiet, modest. The kind of woman people might overlook if they're only paying attention to surface beauty. But once you get close enough, you realize how rare someone like her really is. She's loving, loyal, and has this gentle strength in her. She tends to wear oversized clothes, always a bit self-conscious about her body, but to me she's absolutely beautiful, inside and out. I'll never forget one night in particular. We'd had a fight, not a major one, just one of those emotional scrapes couples sometimes go through. I spent most of the evening trying to make it right, to reconnect. And oddly enough, it was that very night, after all the vulnerability and honesty, that our bond deepened in a way I didn't expect. It felt like we reached a new level of understanding. But our relationship hasn't been perfect. Far from it. I have my flaws. I'm the kind of guy who, without meaning to, forgets things. Anniversaries. Plans. Even things that matter a lot to the person I care about. I never intend to hurt anyone. It just happens because my brain tends to skip over the finer details. And I know that's caused Kelly pain more than once. She's no angel either, she has her own quirks. Sometimes she reacts emotionally, makes assumptions, or says things that get under my skin. But I guess that's the nature of real relationships, right? We're just two imperfect people trying to love each other the best way we can. One of the challenges we faced early on was that we didn't live together. Kelly's parents still have a strong say in her life, and she was hesitant about moving in with me, even though we were serious. Part of it was cultural. Part of it was fear, I think. But what really got to me, what shook me, was what she said during that phone call with her friend Gina. She told Gina that she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep doing this. That it hurt when I forgot things that mattered to her. Birthdays. Our anniversary. Even little moments she hoped I'd hold on to. She said that sometimes, it felt like I was just keeping her around because it was convenient. That I wasn't showing her she mattered in the ways that count. And hearing that crushed me. Because I do love her. Fully. Deeply. But it's like I'd failed to show it in a language she understands. In her eyes, my forgetfulness was more than just being absent-minded, it was evidence that she wasn't truly important to me. She wondered aloud, why would someone like me, someone she considered attractive, charming even, struggle so much with remembering the things that show someone you care? Then she said something that stopped me cold. Maybe if he could just remember one thing, just one important date, and surprise me, I'd feel different. Maybe I wouldn't doubt myself so much. She wasn't angry when she said it. She was just sad. Tired. After she hung up with Gina, I sat there quietly thinking. Gina, bless her heart, had given Kelly advice, support, even encouragement to talk to me more openly. And I realized then how grateful I was for that. Because it woke me up. I hadn't meant to come off as cold or inattentive. But intentions don't erase pain. Kelly needed more from me, not grand gestures, not expensive gifts, just presence. Just to feel like she mattered in my world as much as she actually does. That night I made a promise to myself. I may never be perfect, but I was going to try, to really try, to show up for her in the way she needed. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to keep what we had from slipping through my fingers. After I left Greg's apartment that day, I didn't waste a second. I threw myself into action, determined to salvage what I could with Kelly, to prove to her that I was serious about building a future together. I remembered her mentioning this restaurant she loved, this little upscale spot she talked about more than once. She always lit up when she described it. Gina had mentioned it too, and looking back, I wondered if there was more to that. Maybe Gina was nudging me. Or maybe, in her own way, she was comparing, dropping hints that her boyfriend was taking her to places like that while I hadn't. I guess sometimes we hear people without really listening. That memory replayed in my head as I made the reservation. Her and Gina giggling, throwing light-hearted jabs my way. They were teasing, sure, but it stuck with me. I think what really hit me was how easy it was for people, even the ones close to us, to put someone in a box. No matter how sweet the words were, I still felt like I was on the outside, like I wasn't measuring up. So, I decided to change the script. I went out, bought a new suit, something sharp. I'd always been more of a jeans and sweater kind of guy, the kind of man who kept things simple. But this time I stepped into the discomfort. I even sat down in a barbershop chair and let them give me a full restyle. It was tough letting go of that rough around the edges version of myself, but I wanted Kelly to see effort. I wanted her to see intention. And maybe, for once, I wanted to feel it myself. Then I asked her out. Valentine's Day. Special dinner. Just us. She looked at me like I'd grown another head. Dave, are you feeling okay? She asked, half laughing. You're asking me out for Valentine's Day? Yeah, I said, trying not to sound nervous. Is that so strange? She smiled. It's just, you've never asked me out on that day before. Well, I'm asking now. Because I love you, Kelly. And I want to show it. There was a pause. She hesitated for a second, then said, I had plans, but I can cancel. Plans? What kind of plans? Oh, nothing serious. Gina and I were going to a party. But this sounds better. That moment meant everything to me. But of course, life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you just when you think you've found your footing. A few hours before our reservation, I got a call from the restaurant. My booking had been canceled. Just like that. Turns out, some wealthy guy had bought out the entire place for a private event. They were canceling all other reservations, mine included. I pleaded, argued, even offered to pay extra. But the waiter just shook his head and apologized, saying the refund would be issued automatically. I was crushed. Desperate, I tried calling every decent restaurant in town. Everything was booked solid. No room anywhere. It was Valentine's Day, of course it was. All I could do was accept that our special evening was turning into a quiet night at home. I tried to embrace the idea of a cozy dinner, maybe candles, a home-cooked meal. I could still make it meaningful. But my hope didn't last long. I was heading back from the store, groceries in hand, when I saw something that made my chest go cold. Kelly. In the passenger seat of my friend's Jeep. Not just any friend, someone I had considered close. Someone I never imagined would be in that position. She saw me too. I was standing on the sidewalk, frozen. She looked at me, just for a second, then quickly turned her head away like she couldn't bear to face me. I stood there, stunned, gripping that paper bag like it could anchor me to the ground. My heart was pounding. My thoughts were spiraling. And I knew right then and there that this story wasn't over, that there was more heartache coming. I just didn't know how much yet. That was the moment it hit me. I had lost her. And it wasn't just the heartbreak of losing Kelly, it was the gut-punch realization that my so-called friend had stepped right into the void I left behind. Like he was waiting for the door to open. Sometime later, I found myself rifling through a trash bin behind my building. Literally. That's how low things had gotten. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just maybe a piece of the life I'd lost. I don't know what I expected to find, maybe closure in a crumpled receipt or some half-forgotten memento. And then, without warning, it all came spilling out of me. That anger. That helplessness. It boiled up and erupted the moment I saw Kelly again. You called her, didn't you? I snapped, my voice trembling. You're loving this, aren't you? Are you happy now? I didn't even recognize myself in that moment. This bitter, broken man accusing the woman he once planned to marry. The same woman who now stood with another man, one I used to trust. It felt like my world had collapsed, and I was the only one left standing in the rubble. I wouldn't be surprised if you were behind everything, my place burning down, all of it, I growled. Well, congratulations, Gina. Looks like you finally got what you wanted. Her face twisted in disbelief. I'm not gloating, she said quietly, her voice cracking. No matter what you think, I'm not. But I couldn't hear her. Not really. I was too far gone. By that point, I was deep into a bottle, slurring words and fighting to keep my head up. I barely noticed when Kelly and Gina came through the door. Kelly's eyes were red, puffy, she'd been crying. Gina looked furious. But honestly, their emotions didn't land. I was numb to everything except the glass in front of me. The bartender barely glanced in my direction anymore, as if he didn't want to be part of the train wreck unraveling in his bar. Kelly approached, hesitantly reaching out to hug me. But I shoved her away. My rage, my grief, it overpowered everything else. You think you can just show up now? I barked. After everything? Dave? She whispered, but I couldn't let her speak. The pain was too fresh. Too loud. Gina stepped between us. You need to stop, she said firmly. Kelly adores you. She's been a wreck ever since all this happened. And you, sitting here drinking yourself into oblivion, is not helping. Drop your pride, Dave. Sleep it off and talk to her in the morning. I stared at her, hollowed out. You've been waiting for this for a long time, haven't you? I muttered. Always casting me in a shadow. Always wanting me to lose her. Her expression softened for a moment, then hardened again. You've always surrounded yourself with that kind of thinking, she said. Like people are just waiting for you to fail. I downed another drink. Well, maybe they were. Do you have any idea what you put us through last night? She continued. Your apartment was on fire, Dave. Fire. You weren't answering your phone. Sam tried to get through to you, but you were already halfway to this dump. I didn't remember most of it. I just remembered stumbling into the bar, trying to drown everything in liquor. Kelly stepped forward then, and this time she didn't speak. She just slowly pulled a few things from her pockets and placed them on the bar beside me. A dinner reservation receipt. A clothing tag from the new suit. And a charred little box, the one that once held the ring. My heart sank. It was all in your pockets, she said quietly, with a tinge of hurt in her voice. You were planning something beautiful. And now? She trailed off. I looked at that box for a long time. I didn't say a word. Gina's voice cut through the haze like a blade. I found them before I washed your clothes, she said, setting the items gently on the bar. Maybe you'd like to explain to Kelly what these 3 mystery objects are. Because I, for one, would love to hear your version. Her words stung, but not because they were cruel. Because they were true. I looked down at the 2 receipts and the charred ring box lying there like artifacts from a life I was about to throw away. One receipt from the tailor. One from Del Rio's, Kelly's favorite restaurant. And the box? The one that used to hold the ring I bought weeks ago. It all hit me at once. Gina wasn't the enemy. She never had been. I'd spent the last 24 hours building a storm in my head, convinced she was trying to sabotage what Kelly and I had. I twisted her actions, ignored her kindness, and painted her as some manipulative force in my life, when all along she'd been fighting for us. I never tried to come between you two, Gina said, her voice steady but full of emotion. I've always supported your relationship. Always encouraged you both even when you didn't seem to notice. And now you accuse me? Without any proof? Without even asking? There was no defense. No excuse. Just the sharp sting of guilt. I was wrong, I muttered, my throat dry. Gina, I'm sorry. I let all the worst parts of my mind take over. I didn't think. I just reacted. She gave a small nod, her arms crossed tightly against her chest. Instead of thinking the best of the people who care about you, you assumed the worst. That's not love, Dave. That's fear. She was right. All of it. I had let fear drive me. Fear of losing Kelly, fear of not being enough, fear that I'd already ruined everything before I ever had a chance to truly show her what she meant to me. And as I sat there, holding the receipt from Del Rio's, the truth became crystal clear. That reservation, the one I had fought so hard for, hadn't been canceled because of fate or sabotage. It was canceled because some rich guy threw his weight around and bought out the place. A stupid twist of bad luck. That was all. And yet I'd turned it into something so much uglier in my mind. I stared down at the ring box, blackened at the corners but still intact. Just seeing it again brought a wave of memories. Our first date, her laugh when she couldn't open a wine bottle, the time she fell asleep on my shoulder during a movie and I didn't dare move because she looked so peaceful. All of it came rushing back. And I knew what I had to do. Without another thought, I turned toward Kelly. She stood there frozen, her expression a mix of hope and heartbreak. I reached for her hands, gently taking them in mine. Then I dropped to one knee. Kelly, I said, my voice shaking, I've made a lot of mistakes. I've doubted the wrong people. I've let fear get the best of me. But there's one thing I've never doubted, not for a second, and that's how much I love you. Her eyes widened, lips parted, like she couldn't believe what was happening. I bought this ring for you weeks ago, I continued, holding up the box. I had a whole night planned. But life got messy and I got in my own way. I don't care about the dinner or the suit or the perfect moment. I care about you. And I don't want to go another day without telling you, really telling you, that I want to spend my life with you. The room went quiet. Too quiet. Like time had stretched out. Kelly glanced over at Gina, whose hands now covered her mouth in pure disbelief. And there I was, on my knees, heart exposed, waiting for the only answer that mattered. I glanced at Gina just briefly, then turned my eyes back to Kelly. I didn't know what to say. There was a silence between us that felt delicate, like speaking too soon might shatter it. Then, with the gentlest motion, Kelly leaned in and opened the ring box in front of her. Her fingers moved slowly, as if she were afraid the moment might vanish if she moved too fast. And there it was, the ring. Simple, elegant, glowing in the light. Its shine didn't come close to the woman who held it, though. Not even close. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted it from the velvet lining. And then, without saying a word, she slid it onto her fourth finger with such quiet care that I barely breathed watching it happen. I didn't know if I'd cry or laugh or just sit there frozen forever. But I knew what I was seeing. Something real. Something worth everything we'd just been through. And then, like clockwork, someone had to try and ruin it. He'd been lurking around the edges of our lives for a while now. Never overt, never bold, just quietly inserting himself whenever he thought he saw an opening. And apparently he thought this was one of those moments. "Hey, Kelly," he said, stepping up with the smugness of a guy who thought charm would carry him over decency. "I need to tell you something. I really don't think Dave is right for you, especially after everything that happened yesterday. Just let me take you out to dinner. We'll talk. Just us." Before either of us could react, Gina turned to him like a storm rolling in from the horizon. She snatched the phone from Kelly's hand and pressed it to her ear. "Hey Mike, you still there?" she asked, her voice like ice. There was a pause, probably some smooth talk or excuse from his end. Gina didn't flinch. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice sharp and unwavering. "Kelly's not interested in you. Or in any other guy. She's with someone who sees her. Someone she chose. So take the hint and back off." And with that, she ended the call and handed the phone back to Kelly without a word. Her expression was stone cold. That was the moment it really sunk in for me, how wrong I'd been about Gina. For the longest time, I had believed she wanted to drive a wedge between Kelly and me. I'd assumed she was competing or meddling or worse. But now I saw it clearly. Gina was fiercely loyal. Protective. The kind of friend you'd want in your corner, especially when everything's falling apart. I felt ashamed, honestly deeply ashamed, that I'd misjudged her so completely. As for Mike, he didn't give up right away. He tried a few more times to reach out to Kelly. Messaging. Showing up where he thought she might be. But she didn't respond. She avoided him, no drama, no confrontation. Just distance. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. Kelly was mine. Not because I owned her, not because I earned her, but because she chose me. And that choice, it meant more than anything. Not long before the wedding, Kelly gave me some incredible news. It was one of those evenings where time just slows down. She'd stayed late at work, and I had dinner waiting when she walked through the door, tired but glowing in that way only she could. She sat down across from me and smiled. "I have something to tell you," she said, her eyes glimmering with a secret she could barely hold in.